welcome to the latest episode of the Osborne Group Chat. My name is Laurel McCombs. I'm the Senior Advisor with the Osborne Group, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Bob Osborne. Hello, Bob.
Hello, Laurel. It's good to see you
Good to
again.
see you. Yeah,
We are
always.
doing another TOG chat. So it's good.
Absolutely. And as Bob and I were trying to think about what to talk about today, kind of the obvious thing kind of jumped up. We thought, well, should we talk about end of year? Because it's the end of the year and it feels like every blog post and podcast that's coming out right now is kind of talking about the end of the year. And so we thought, well, maybe should we add our piece to this, or should we go somewhere else? And we ultimately thought, we have a few things we did want to just chat about with the end of the year. And I guess one of the things that came up for me, and this actually came up recently in a coaching call that I was doing with someone, and they were having just a hard time with prioritization, and they're kind of like, well, but what about this and what about this? And I said, whoa, I was like, you've got a bad case of the whatabouts. And it occurred to me that as fundraisers, we often get struck with bad cases of the whatabouts, that no matter how many calls you make, no matter how many visits you have, no matter how many donors you get in touch with, or any number of activities that you do, there's always this kind of the whatabouts sitting in the back of your mind that says, well, what about that donor? And what about that foundation that we haven't gotten a proposal out to? Or what about that corporation? And it feels like the whatabouts strike even worse at the end of the year, because you're seeing all of the other things that other organizations do. You see other people who got into this year's Give Guide, and we didn't even submit our application, and other people who are doing these really grandiose Giving Tuesday strategies, and you're like, oh, we were just going to send out a couple emails, right? there's all and I think too, like for your board members, there's a lot of board members coming to you and saying, oh my gosh, I saw this really cool thing. What about that for us? Right. So it's not just our own whatabouts, but it's like all the other people who are seeing all this activity and bringing whatabouts to us. So I guess I just having had that conversation recently, I wanted to just come and chat with you today, Bob, about like, how do we make it all happen at the end of the year? How do we prioritize effectively? How do we figure out what the best, highest ROI kind of strategies are, and do that while protecting our own mental health a little bit and our own time a little bit? Because I think it can get a little hairy out there for folks. So I don't know. I would love to hear from you, Bob, about kind of what you see out there at this time of year and some of your tips.
Yeah, I mean, I think that rings true. I mean, the reality is this fundraising season of ours, which really lasts from about September 15th to December 15th, it's not actually very long, right? It's 3 months, and we have to jam a lot in those 3 months. And these 3 months or when people traditionally give. And so I think it feels like so much of our work has to happen right now. And it can feel like really overwhelming, as you were implying with the whatabouts. And so it's not a surprise to me that people are feeling that way. And I would also say that I think our work is inherently messy, right? Like you're dealing with people, there's a lot. If we're doing our work well, we're actually like really generating a lot of leads, and we're generating a lot of activity, and we're generating a lot of follow-up. So almost in a weird way, the more successful you are, the more chaotic everything gets. And I think that can be really, really challenging. And so for me, what I try to do is like really keep my eye on the ball. And the number one thing I keep my eye on the ball at the end of the year is like, who gave last year? Who hasn't given this year yet, and make sure that I ask them for money in some way. At the end of the day, that's really, to me, the most important thing. And there's things we need to do around that. We need to steward people. We don't want to ask them if they haven't been stewarded. There's ways of doing that. But like, that's the thing I try to keep my eye on, is like, did everyone who gave last year, and maybe even the year before that, did I solicit them this year in some way. And to me, that's the area that's going to have the highest return on investment. It's going to be your best bet, because you're talking about donors that have, that have given, in the recent past. And it's the easiest thing, that I can do. And everything else is not unimportant, but I think that's really very much at the core of what I try to do, and just like have a plan for doing that solicitation. And then everything else, I try to fit in as best I can. But I don't know, but what do you think about at this time of year, and how do you think about prioritizing your time, or what do you advise your clients?
So it's so interesting. Everything as you were talking, my brain was going a million miles an hour, because I think it's right that you really are at this point in the year, especially now it's November, right? We're well past September 15th at this
Yeah.
point, and we're really into crunch time. And it's so interesting, all the statistics, right? Like the statistic, I think it's something like a quarter of all giving is made between Thanksgiving and Christmas, right? Like in essentially like a 5-week period, a quarter of all giving in this country. Now, I will like grain of salt that with like the fact that Giving Tuesday is included in that, right? So you have the single biggest day of giving in the world happening in that time period, which I think kind of shades that number a little bit. But and so I think on one hand, there's this almost over kind of dependence on then what that means for us in terms of raising a lot of money in that period of time. But I think you're right, Bob, that starting kind of with those folks who have given before, and figuring out what the best strategy is to kind of reach out and get those gifts. The other thing I see a lot of folks do is trying to make up for what they didn't do the whole rest of the year in the last like 3 months of the year, right? So we always, I think, anybody who follows us or has listened to anything we have said before about end of year giving is we always kind of take like a stewardship first approach, like make sure you're stewarding folks really well. Our last 2 chats have been about stewardship, so anybody who wants to ponder more about that topic, please go check those out. But at this point, it's November 3rd today. Like, at this point, if you haven't been stewarding your folks, I'm not sure you've got a lot of time to do anything that's substantive or impactful, right? I mean, do it. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying recognize that, I just see a lot of people who are like, okay, we have essentially like 6 weeks left to communicate with people. We're going to, do a stewardship piece and then a solicitation and then a stewardship piece. And so now you're contacting people like every week for the next 6 weeks when they haven't heard from you at all for the rest of the year. So some of this is a little bit, and I think we probably will have another chat in the next few weeks about how to get ready and prepare for 2024 in a way that maybe doesn't leave all of this for the last 2 months of the year. But I think there is some reflection to be done. Like if you feel like you are now in a position where you're having to email everybody every week for the next 5 weeks, then maybe you should have been doing some other things ahead of time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true, and I like you. It's not necessarily too late, but it would have been a lot better, 6 weeks ago, mid-September. Actually, I think it was a great time, early October, depending on when you're going to do that end of the year solicitation. Maybe 6 weeks before that, have done some kind of impact reporting to your donors. I think is an effective formula. An impact report, a solicitation, and then some kind of reminder afterwards, in case, just to remind people that, hey, we're here. If you didn't give any money, we're here. So I think that works well, and I think it's never too late to do stewardship. But you're right, you don't want to be spamming people too much. The other thing I find though is some of this is like what to do, and some of it is maybe a little bit of like what not to do. And I think a lot of folks spend time this time of year really thinking not just about that solicitation, but also the holiday card that has to go out that may not really be a good use of your time, depending on what that holiday card actually looks like. So I was talking to someone today, and they sent out a nice card with, with a group picture of the organization, and a happy holidays, and which is nice. I'm not saying it's not, but in terms of like, how are we going to spend our resources, a card that just says happy holidays is not in any way tied to some kind of larger donor strategy, that is just being thankful, and it's just really communicating that you're thoughtful people, but not really telling me anything about the work that you're doing, not really telling me anything about the impact that my donation has had, not really conveying any information to me at all. I wonder, well, I don't wonder, I don't think that's the best way to spend your time, particularly when you can very easily tweak that to be something that is reporting impact, that is conveying some kind of information, even if the picture was different, right? Like, depending on your organization, a picture can tell a good story about who you are. And so, and I find that people just feel obliged in some way that the holiday card must go out, and so it's nice. But again, if you're kind of weighing, if you're like, oh no, it's November 3rd or whenever this comes out, that we, what do I do? This probably wouldn't be top of my priority list.
Well, and I think what you said about just what are the tweaks that you can do, right? Because if it's in the calendar and everybody is set on doing it, that's fine. But to your point, I actually just this morning was editing copy for a client's Thanksgiving card, right? So they sent me, because we had a conversation about, don't just say thank you, and again, go check out our chat from a few weeks ago about kind of moving beyond just saying thank you in your stewardship. And I was kind of chatting with them about that. So then this morning they sent me the copy and they said, well, these are the adjustments we made, what do you think? And I went in and made some additional tweaks, and and I think it's much better now. Like, they're actually pointing to some direct outcomes that happened this year, and I encourage them to think about talking about investment versus gratitude for generosity, right? I said, tell them that you appreciate their investment versus just, we're grateful for your generosity, right? And I and include not just what you did, but include what's different because you did it, right? And so kind of moving away from, we did X number of this, to this is what's different now. This is the outcome of what happened. And I think it's much stronger for it. And now I'm kind of excited for them to send it out, right? So, I think we kind of have like a check the box mentality. Like, here's our calendar, here's the things we're supposed to get out, here's how we've always done it. Check the box, get it out, without really kind of taking a critical eye to your point, A, should we be doing this at all? And B, if we are going to do it, how do we actually make it worth the time and effort and money? Because it costs money to print that and mail it and all the things, right? So yeah, I think that's right. I got also too, like, it, which kind of leads me to this other thing that happens a lot, but I think it happens a lot at the end of the year, which is just tempering your expectation to be aligned with the strategy you are deploying, right? So I feel like this time of year, more than any other time of the year, I see folks who are doing kind of a lot of broad-based, non-personalized kind of stuff, which there's nothing wrong with that. Social media, email, direct marketing, mail, direct mail, all of those things that all have their role in the development process and in bringing in dollars and in, acquisition, but who are kind of expecting bigger results from a bottom line perspective than what those strategies are intended to do, right? So I just think about, like, folks, and I think Giving Tuesday is a great example. I think some people have really, really powerful Giving Tuesday strategies that include in-person events that are tied to social media strategies that are tied to a mail program that are super intricate and bring in lots of dollars. And I think other folks will send out a couple emails and do a couple posts on their social media and expect the same results, right? And so I think the biggest thing is I want people to be really just cognizant of what your expected return is given the strategy that you're going to deploy.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think Giving Tuesday is a great example of that, because I've certainly had conversations over the last month of like, well, we have to do Giving Tuesday because it'll be weird if we don't. And I'm like, it's not really a strategy. It may be, it may be true, it may not be true, but it's probably not a great reason in and of itself to do it. Like, I don't necessarily think it's weird to not do Giving Tuesday because you're spending resources on it, and maybe that's not the best use of your resources. There's going to be a lot of organizations doing Giving Tuesday. I certainly get lots of solicitations on Giving Tuesday. I'm certainly not going through my mental checklist of like, who didn't send me something on Giving Tuesday, and you wonder a little bit, or like, are organizations just doing this because they feel like it's obligatory in some way, rather than, okay, how are we going to get the most out of Giving Tuesday if we're going to do it, given the fact that every organization under the sun is going to be doing the same thing? How do we get the most out of it? How do we stand out? Would we be better off doing something the day before or the day after or nowhere near Giving Tuesday? And so I think those are all valid questions, and kind of comes back to your original premise about the whatabouts, that we kind of think about. There is a momentum, and we can kind of feel like, oh, well, it's Giving Tuesday, so we have to do something. Oh, it's the holiday, so we have to send a holiday card. Oh, it's, we have to send some kind of solicitation, which you probably should actually, but like this feeling of like obligation that's not tied in any way to this larger strategy. And again, to your first point also, that it feels crammed in because we haven't really done it all along, and so yeah, I think it's an interesting momentum that we kind of feel as a sector, because everyone is doing it and we kind of feel like we have to do it, and we're not necessarily, again, we'll talk about this probably at the next chat, like sitting down in January or even late December and kind of thinking about, what is my long-term strategy for the year? What is my plan? What is my calendar? What is going to actually happen this year? And does it hold together? Is it just a collection of activities, or is there a strategy behind it in some way?
And to maybe start to wrap this up, I think there is even some, not to be blasphemous, but I think maybe there's some chicken and egg to end of year fundraising, right? I mean, there's always been a part of me that has said like, yeah, I get it. People are in a, and it's the holidays, it's the spirit of giving, it's all that, and there's tax implications to getting gifts made before the end of the tax year. I mean, I understand all of that, but I also wonder how much of the amount of money that is given at this time of year is also driven by the fact that most nonprofits wait and do the majority of their solicitation this time of year, right? And
Yeah.
so I would really encourage folks to go talk to their donors, right? And talk about, well, how would you feel about us coming to you in May with our major kind of solicitation and discussions about your annual gift, or and again, just looking at, and we'll talk about this next time, like, how am I maybe spreading some of this out throughout the year, so that I'm not kind of relying on all of this activity right at the end of the year when everybody else in the nonprofit sector is also doing all of their activity. And and again, I just to piggyback on what you said about Giving Tuesday, I have said to a few people over the last few weeks, like, yeah, send out some emails or put some posts on social media, like, be out there, there's no harm in it, but also, again, recognize expectation versus input, right? So like, if you're not going to do a lot, you're not going to get a lot. It's Giving Tuesday is not a silver bullet. It's not just because billions of dollars are given on that day, doesn't mean that doing anything, just any activity, will result in success for you, right? So
Yeah.
put into it what you want to put into it, or don't put anything into it, but then also have realistic expectations for what you're going to get.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. So I think that's probably a good note to end on. And yeah, I'm looking forward to our next conversation when we talk about end of the year or beginning of the year planning and really thinking about the next year. But for now, I would say everyone, you still have about 6 weeks to get some things done, and just thinking about, be thoughtful about what you're going to do. And I think our theme is intentionality, right? Like in everything we do is like, don't just do it because everyone's doing it, or you feel like you should do it or have to do it. Know why you're doing it. And to your point, Laurel, know what you can expect from having done that, and just having realistic expectations. And then, but whatever happens, at least you understand why it's happening, and you can make further decisions based on that. So, well, this has been a good chat as always, and we will see you all next time.
Thanks.